arrested, and dozens now face treason charges, a clear sign of how far democratic space has narrowed. Tundu Lissu, a long-time defender of democracy and chairman of the party Kadema, was arrested 6 months before the elections and charged with high treason, a crime that still carries the death penalty under Tanzanian law. His case is emblematic of a broader pattern: intimidation of the opposition, media restriction, and enforced disappearances. The EU has to stop its substantial financial support to Tanzania. Such cooperation must be firmly tied to progress on the rule of law, fundamental freedoms, and accountability. Europe must monitor the situation closely, speak with clarity, and act consistently.
Ďakujem a teraz poprosím pána kolegu Hajdeho.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haider.
Frau Kommissarin.
President, Commissioner, we are calling for the unconditional release of Tundu Lissu. The events in Tanzania in connection with the elections on the 29th of October are shocking, and they require a clear response from the European Parliament. President Samia Suluhu Hassan was elected with 97.66% of the votes. That figure represents a system that not only excludes the opposition but actually suppresses it. Opposition leaders like Tundu Lissu were excluded from the elections, arrested and accused on the basis of terrorism and cybercrime laws, and they are still imprisoned. The population protested against it, but it was a brutal response from the authorities. On the election day, there was death, there were violent reactions. There was the internet that was shut down for 6 days, and this is a shocking, unacceptable development. As the European Parliament, we need to be clear. Whoever drags away the opposition, who shoots down people who are demonstrating, who locks up journalists, whoever persecutes LGBTQI activists is violating fundamental principles that make it possible to have international partnerships. So therefore, we call for the unconditional release of all political prisoners, above all Tundu Lissu. We are calling for an end to the violence, to the arbitrary arrests and the intimidation campaigns against political opponents, civil society and the media. We're calling for independent investigations into the killings, kidnappings and violations of human rights over the past few weeks, and we want information about these mass graves. Our European support must not strengthen the perpetrators. We expect the Commission to check the support provided to state bodies. And we want priority for people who are fighting for democracy and human rights in Tanzania. The people of Tanzania need our solidarity now.
Teraz poprosím pani kolegyňu Al-Sahlani.
Thank you very much. Madam Al-Sahlani has the floor.
Tanzania is not aftermath after elections, but a national tragedy. On 29th of October, President Samia Suluhu Hassan crowned herself with a victory of 97% of the votes after silencing the very people who challenged her. And when citizens rose up, especially the young, they were met with bullets, brutality, and a blockade on truth. Hundreds killed, hundreds injured, hundreds arrested, entire country living in fear. Let us say his name clearly. Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader charged with treason, locked away simply because he exercised his democratic right to run for elections. And his imprisonment is a broader assault on democracy in Tanzania that is taking away all the promises to the Tanzanian people of their freedom. And to the Tanzanian people, we have heard you. We are on your side. This House has chosen to stand by you. Thank you.
A teraz poprosím pani kolegyňu Feira.
Thank you. Madam Vieira has the floor.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, months ago I stood here calling on the authorities of Tanzania to release all political prisoners, and today that call is more urgent than ever. Tanzania is showing a deeply troubling pattern of repression and abuse. Critics, like opposition leaders, journalists and activists, face threats, arbitrary arrests, extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances. The government is shutting down free media and taking away people's basic rights to speak, gather and move. Human rights defenders are in grave danger. The cases of Agathar Atuir and Boniface Mwangi, who came from Uganda and Kenya to observe the trial of Tundu Lissu, prove it. They were arrested and allegedly beaten and tortured by members of the army, and their story demands urgent accountability and justice. The October elections further exposed the scale of repression. Voters were denied a real choice and security forces used deadly force against protesters. Today, I urge again the authorities in Tanzania to release Tundu Lissu and investigate disappearances of government critics, including that of Humphrey Polepole. Colleagues, we all care about human rights in Tanzania, so we need to do more. Beyond raising these issues at the highest level, the EU must also establish long-term support for human rights defenders and journalists, and ensure that our systems allow those most at risk to relocate and find legal pathways for asylum. Our actions, not only our words, must match the needs of the people of Tanzania. Thank you very much.
Ďakujem a teraz poprosím kolegu.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. McAllister.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, what happened before, during and after the elections in Tanzania was regrettably no surprise. This was not an irregularity, but the systematic destruction of democratic competition. These elections were marred by state-sponsored political repression, targeted abductions and manipulation. The outcome was decided well before the 29th of October. It began with the suffocation of civic space and the silencing of free media. It continued with the banning of political assemblies and opposition parties, and it became undeniable with the imprisonment of nearly every leading opposition representative, above all the leader of Chadema, Mr. Tundu Lissu. For nearly 250 days, my personal friend Tundu Lissu has endured solitary confinement, possibly facing a death sentence simply for demanding free and fair elections. But this is not just about one individual fate. This is the textbook example of how an authoritarian regime weaponizes the law to eliminate its opponents. On election day and the hours that followed, the regime showed its true colors when the internet was shut down, when protesters were beaten, shot, abducted, and jailed. Madam Commissioner, I call on the European Commission and I call on the European External Action Service not to slip back into business as usual. I will spare you the diplomatic language used in recent statements, but the tone was certainly not as clear as it should have been. Tanzania's continued pivot from the rule of law, reform and good governance demands a genuine assessment of our bilateral relationship. Colleagues, if we truly stand for democracy and human rights, we cannot stop at words. Let us use every tool at our disposal to hold those in power accountable. Tomorrow, this House will send an unmistakable message. All EU funds channeled through state-controlled entities must be frozen immediately. The European Union must not use its fund to subsidize oppression. The time to act is now. All political prisoners must be released immediately and with no conditions. Urgently required is an independent and credible investigation into all killings, abductions, and enforced disappearances. The great people of Tanzania, they deserve new, free, and credible elections. Thank you, and free Tundu Lissu now.
Ďakujem pekne a nakoľko Madame de la Pisa.
Thank you very much. Madame de la Pisa Carrion is not here, and so Mr. Uchin has the floor.
President, colleagues, what we are witnessing in Tanzania is not just the erosion of democracy. It's a systemic assault on the rights of citizens to speak, to protest, and to choose their representatives. The elections were neither free nor fair. Tanzanians took the streets peacefully. However, government responded with bullets and reportedly killed hundreds of civilians. At the center of this repression stands the case of Tundu Lissu, who survived an assassination attempt and is now imprisoned under treason charges simply for challenging a system that fears accountability. He's held in degrading and life-threatening conditions without proper access to legal counsel or medical care. We demand that he must be released immediately and unconditionally, along with all other detained for exercising basic political freedoms. And we call for strong and coordinated EU measures, including the suspension of direct financial support to the Tanzanian authorities. But beyond condemning, we must push for inclusive political dialogue, credible reforms, and a genuine return to democratic governance where citizens' rights and freedoms are at the heart of the process. Only then Tanzania can be a good partner for the European Union. Thank you.
Ďakujem a teraz poprosím kolegu.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gunther has the floor.
Sprechen wir es aus.
Let us be clear. We cannot recognise the results of the election in Tanzania. The repression continues against Chadema, against the ACT, against the Maasai, and even against opposition members within the ruling party. We have to fear further protests being prevented around December the 9th, and the process being brutally suppressed once again, and people dying. I have a message for you from a representative of the Maasai. The massacres that took place after the election in Tanzania are the result of years of repression. Thousands of people have been arbitrarily detained, activists have disappeared, journalists have been silenced. My people, the Maasai, have been removed from the electoral register. This is something that aims to drive us off our land to make way for luxury tourism and projects for raw materials. The EU action plan for Tanzania that is being presented contains neither democratic conditions nor a political risk assessment and therefore violates EU rules. If it is adopted as it is, it would send the message that raw materials are more important to you than the lives of our people. Silence today means complicity.
Ďakujem. A teraz pristúpime ku Catch the Eye. Mám tu...
Thank you. Now we have Catch the Eye. First speaker is Mr. Signiewski.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, there is a proverb which you probably know, Hakuna Matata, nothing to worry about, but there is something to worry about. There is a reason to worry. Tanzania is a beautiful country. It has Kilimanjaro. You can do safari there. But unfortunately today, this country shows us what is happening in Africa as a whole. It's a beautiful continent, but there is a lot of violence in this country too. We have we should have had two candidates educated in the West, competing fairly and squarely, but it didn't happen. People have been killed, people have been disappeared, people have been arrested. We need to react, but we cannot instrumentalize those tragedies. We need to demand that people are being freed, but this is in the name of humanity, not political interference.
Przemocy i skoncentrowały się na dialogu.
Thank you very much.
Dziękuję.
Thank you. A teraz poprosím kolegu Sipera. Nech sa páči.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vizepräsident, liebe Menschen Europas. In meiner Heimatstadt gab es bei den lokalen Wahlen über Jahrzehnte ein wiederkehrendes Phänomen. Der Amtsinhaber gewann die Wahlen mit 92%, 94%, 96%. Und nach diesen Wahlen gab es keine Proteste, es gab keine Unterdrückung der Opposition, es gab keine Verhaftungen. Solche Wahlergebnisse, wie wir sie jetzt angeblich in Tansania gesehen haben, sind in einer funktionierenden Demokratie möglich. Aber wenn man seinem Volk Gewalt antun muss, wenn man die Führer der Opposition, so wie Tundu Lissu, einsperren muss und das unter furchtbarsten Bedingungen, wenn man sich verstecken muss vor dem Willen der Menschen, dann ist das ein klares Zeichen für nichts anderes als Wahlfälschung. Und das in einem System, was mit blutigen Repressionen auf jede abweichende Meinung reagiert. Ich möchte den Autorinnen und Autoren danken für diese wichtige Resolution und mich der Forderung nach der Freilassung aller politischen Gefangenen, insbesondere Tundu Lissu, anschließen. Dankeschön.
Ďakujem, a to nám uzatvára Catch the Eye, a tak by som poprosil za komisiu pani komisárku alebo kroky. Nech sa páči.
President, honourable members, the United Republic of Tanzania held presidential and parliamentary elections on 29 October 2025. The elections saw a number of irregularities and low voter turnout, which was noted by all local and international observers. On election day and thereafter, violence broke out, which claimed a very high, by all credible reports too high, yet still uncounted number of deaths due to the shutdown of the country. The EU has expressed our serious concerns in the High Representative's statement on behalf of the EU 27 member states. Our thoughts are with the families of those who died and suffered injuries. The pre-election period was marked by a shrinking civil and political space, and there are reliable reports pointing to abductions and disappearances. The pre-election period did not provide a level playing field for political parties. This was marked by the arrest and, according to some, politically motivated treason charges against Mr. Tundu Lissu, the leader of the main opposition party, Chadema, who remains detained for more than 7 months. Over the last years, the EU looked at Tanzania as a partner who could project stability and prosperity in its region. The EU has supported this role through a broad range of programs benefiting directly the population and an ambitious global gateway approach with investments in key sectors of interest for the EU. We acknowledge the communications received from the honourable members of the European Parliament concerning the situation in Tanzania, which we are following very closely. Given the gravity of the situation, the EU has put on hold the adoption of the implementation decision for the Tanzania Annual Action Plan 2025. The EU also takes note of the setting up of an inquiry commission by the Tanzanian authorities. Credible investigations to establish accountability for the events before, during and after elections are key to heal the wounds, rebuild trust and social cohesion in Tanzania. In conclusion, the EU values its long-standing partnership with Tanzania. Democracy, human rights and the rule of law are universal values enshrined in Tanzania's constitution and are always important considerations in the EU's mutually beneficial relations with third countries, implemented through political dialogue and economic cooperation. Although discouraged by these recent events, we still count on the Tanzanian government to demonstrate a genuine commitment to and deliver concrete results of the national policy of reconciliation, resilience, reform and rebuild, which made the reputation of President Samia Suluhu Hassan. The EU is ready to engage on assisting Tanzania in this process. Thank you.
Ďakujem a rozprava k tejto téme sa týmto skončila. Bolo mi doručených 6 návrhov uznesení. Hlasovanie o nich sa uskutoční zajtra. A ďalšou témou rozpravy na dnešnom programe je stupňujúci sa útlak na baháistov v Iráne. A na úvod poprosím ako prvú spoluautorku pani kolegyňu Nerudovú. Nech sa páči.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, imagine losing someone you love, not being able to mourn them in peace and even being forced to bury them in a place that is itself a crime scene. Iranian authorities have installed security cameras and built concrete walls around the burial grounds. These acts are not isolated incidents. They are part of a continuing pattern of tyranny that has targeted the Baha'is for decades, from arbitrary arrest to denial of education, confiscation, and systematic exclusion from public life. Colleagues, this is more than persecution. It's an attempt to erase the history and identity of the whole community. Europe must stand with Baha'is and with all those in Iran whose faith, identity, and very lives are under attack. Thank you.
Ďakujem a ako